Hello, my dear friend, and welcome back to Lullaby and Story Haven. It is time to set aside the burdens of the long day and allow your mind to wander into a world of wonder and peace. Find a truly comfortable position, lying down on your soft bed. Feel the weight of your body being gently supported, so softly, so safely. Now let us take a deep breath together. Feel the fresh air fill your lungs, and then exhale ever so slowly, letting all your worries dissolve with your breath into the silent space of the night. Tonight, I will tell you a story from a time long ago, a story of simple kindness and unexpected magic. Let my voice become a gentle river, softly carrying you into your dreams. You do not need to try to listen. Just relax and let the story find its own way to you. And so, let us begin. Once upon a time, in a kingdom nestled between green, rolling hills and rivers that sparkled like silver, there was a small house on the edge of an ancient forest. The forest whispered the secrets of 1,000 years, while the house was warm with the scent of freshly baked bread and the sound of laughter. In that house, a father and a mother lived with their 3 sons. The eldest son was a clever and astute young man. He always knew how to calculate what was most advantageous for him, and his eyes were always set on what he could gain. The second son was much the same. He was practical and always had sharp arguments to defend his choices. Both of them were trusted by their parents, for they seemed to be the ones who understood the ways of the world. And then there was the youngest son. Everyone called him the simpleton. Not because he was foolish, but because his heart was far too simple. While his brothers were busy with their schemes, the simpleton would be lost in watching the clouds drift by, listening to the birds sing, and feeling the warmth of the sun on his skin. He cared little for getting ahead, and so, in the eyes of others, he seemed rather dull-witted. When there was work to be done, no one thought of him. When there was good news to share, people often forgot him. He lived quietly in his own world, a world gentle and full of peace. And our story begins on just such a clear, blue morning. One day, as the first rays of sun pierced through the leaves, gilding the entire forest in gold, the eldest son decided it was time for him to prove his worth. He said to his father, "Father, today I will go into the forest to chop wood. I will bring back enough firewood for our family to use for the entire winter." The father nodded in satisfaction. The mother, with all her love, prepared a splendid lunch for him. She gave him a fluffy golden egg cake, fragrant with butter and milk, and a bottle of rich, gleaming red wine. "Take this with you," she said, "so that when you are hungry and thirsty in the forest, you will have something to restore your strength." The eldest son slung a sharp axe over his shoulder and strode confidently into the forest. The familiar path led him deeper, where the canopies of ancient trees intertwined like a great green dome. The air in the forest was crisp and clean, and he felt full of vigor. After walking for some time in a quiet clearing, he suddenly saw a little old man sitting on a tree stump. The old man had hair as white as flax and a beard just as hoary. His eyes were kind, but held a distant sorrow. Seeing him approach, the old man slowly stood up, his voice as soft as the rustling of dry leaves. "Greetings, young man. You must be on an arduous journey. I have been here since morning, and now I am both hungry and thirsty. Could you share with me a small piece of the cake in your bag and grant me a sip of your wine?" The eldest son looked the old man up and down. He thought of his delicious cake and his fine bottle of wine. He replied, his voice a little cold, "If I give you my cake and wine, then I shall have nothing left for my own lunch. You should fend for yourself, old man. Let us each go our own way." With that, he brushed past the old man, leaving him standing there with sad eyes, and continued deeper into the forest. He chose a large, sturdy oak tree, swung his axe, and began to chop. But strangely, after only a few blows, as he swung the axe high, it suddenly slipped from his grasp, as if an invisible hand had nudged it away. The blade did not strike the tree trunk, but instead cut into his arm. The wound was not too deep, but it was enough to make him stop his work. He hurried home in a rage, his arm throbbing with pain, and his pride wounded as well. It was a gentle lesson from the forest. A few days later, when the eldest brother's wound had started to heal, the second son announced, "Let me try. I will be more careful than he was." The mother again prepared for him a fragrant egg cake and a bottle of wine, identical to the last. The second son also set off eagerly into the forest. And just like his brother, in that very same quiet clearing, he met the little old man with the silver-white hair. The old man also asked for a little food and drink, his voice just as gentle as before. But the second son, with his cleverness and practicality, shook his head and said quite reasonably, "Sir, what I give away is what I lose. I need to keep my portion to finish my work. You may go on your way now." And so he too left the old man behind, finding another tree to chop. But the forest's gentle punishment found its way to him once more. He had barely swung the axe a few times when he cut himself in the leg. He had to be carried home, his heart filled with bitterness that his plan had failed. The house fell quiet again. The two older brothers sat in a corner, both in pain and ashamed. It was then that the simpleton timidly approached his father and said, "Father, may I go into the forest to chop wood just once?"
The father looked at his youngest son and sighed. "My child," he said, "your two brothers, who are stronger and more clever than you, still met with misfortune. What do you know of chopping wood? It's best you stay home where it's safe." But the simpleton kept pleading. He did not wish to prove anything. He simply wanted to try, to be in the forest that he so loved. "Please, father, just once," he said, his eyes clear and pure. Finally, the father relented. "Very well, then. Go on. Perhaps a little challenge will make you wiser." The mother had no more fine egg cake and rich wine. She only had a little flour mixed with water, hastily baked on the hot ashes of the hearth, creating a simple cake called an ash cake. She gave it to him along with a bottle of sour beer, the cheap drink that was left. "This is all I have, my son," she said, her voice tinged with apology. The simpleton smiled, receiving the gift with reverence. To him, it was all of his mother's love. He happily set off. He entered the forest not with the confidence of his brothers, but with an open heart. He greeted the trees and listened to the babbling brook. And then he too came to the quiet clearing where the little old man with the silver-white hair sat waiting. The old man looked up and repeated his familiar request. "Young man, I am so hungry and thirsty. Could you give me a piece of your cake and a sip from your bottle?" The simpleton looked at his hard ash cake and his sour beer without a moment's hesitation. He smiled kindly. "Sir, I have nothing grand. I only have an ash cake and some sour beer. If you don't mind it, please sit down and eat with me for good company." The old man smiled, a truly radiant smile. They sat down together on the soft, mossy ground. The simpleton carefully unwrapped his cake, and a miracle happened. The moment he took the ash cake from its cloth wrapping, it began to radiate a warm glow. The gray crust turned a shimmering gold, and the sweet aroma of eggs, milk, and sugar filled the air. The ash cake had transformed into the most delicious egg cake in the world. Then he opened the bottle of sour beer, and the cloudy liquid within suddenly turned crystal clear, becoming the sparkling ruby red of the finest wine. The simpleton was astonished, while the old man simply smiled. They shared the magical meal together. When they were full, the old man said to the simpleton, his voice full of affection, "Because you have a kind heart and were willing to share what you have, no matter how little, I too wish to give you a gift. Over there is an old tree. You must chop it down. Amongst its roots you will find something special."
Having said this, the old man gave a nod, then slowly faded into the shimmering forest light, as if he had always been a part of it. The simpleton did as he was told. He went to the old tree and, with a strange new strength, he felled it with ease. The tree came down with a deep, warm sigh, causing no damage at all. And there it was, nestled among the tangled roots that had been pulled from the earth, was a goose. But this was no ordinary goose. Its entire plumage, from head to toe, was made of pure gold, radiating a gentle, warm light like that of the setting sun. The simpleton gently lifted the goose. It was heavy, yet felt wonderfully warm in his arms. He decided to find a nearby inn to rest for the night before bringing this treasure home. Cradling the golden goose, he walked on at a leisurely pace, his heart filled with a calm and peaceful joy. And so, part 1 of our bedtime fairy tale comes to a close. The simpleton, with his kind heart, has begun a journey he knew nothing about. The golden goose, warm in his arms, holds the promise of more wonders to come. When you are ready, let me know, and we shall continue together into part 2 of the story. Dusk began to fall, painting the sky with soft streaks of orange and purple. The simpleton, with the golden goose in his arms, saw the warm, flickering lights of a small inn by the roadside. The inn's roof was covered in a soft layer of green moss, and a thin wisp of smoke, smelling of burning wood, rose gently from the chimney. He decided that would be the place to rest for the night. As he stepped inside, the warm air and the aroma of vegetable soup immediately welcomed him. The innkeeper, a good-natured man, smiled when he saw him. But then his gaze fell upon the goose in the young man's arms. He had never seen such a magnificent creature. Its whole body emitted a soft golden light, making the entire room seem even cozier. "Greetings, young man," the innkeeper said, his voice full of surprise. "Your bird, it's truly special."
The simpleton only smiled gently and asked for a room for the night. The innkeeper had 3 daughters. All 3 were beautiful, but each in her own way. When they saw the golden goose, their eyes lit up with curiosity and admiration. They whispered among themselves, wondering what kind of precious bird it could be, and wished they could have just one of its shimmering golden feathers. The eldest sister, who was always cautious and calculating, thought to herself, "A goose has so many feathers. If I just pluck one very gently, surely no one will notice. An opportunity will surely arise." And her opportunity came. After dinner, the simpleton felt a bit tired from the long day. He placed the goose in a warm corner of the room and went outside to breathe the fresh night air. The moment he was out of sight, the eldest sister tiptoed towards the goose. Her heart beat a little faster. "Just one," she thought, and reached out her hand, intending to grasp a feather on the goose's wing. But a strange thing happened. The moment her fingers touched the golden feather, they seemed to be drawn to it, sticking fast. She felt no pain, just a gentle adhesion from which it was absolutely impossible to break free. Her entire hand was stuck firmly to the goose's wing. She tried to pull, but it was no use. Panicked, but not daring to cry out, she could only stand motionless beside the goose in a very awkward position. A moment later, the second daughter entered the room. She didn't notice her sister's flustered expression, only that she was standing very close to the precious goose. She harbored a similar idea. "Big sister is already there. I'd better be quick," she thought. She walked over and said cheerfully, "What are you doing, sister?" and placed a hand lightly on her sister's shoulder, perhaps intending to pull her away to get her own chance. Instantly, her hand was also stuck fast. The goose's magic had spread. Now the second sister was also trapped, stuck in a line right behind the first. Neither could move. They could only look at each other with eyes of astonishment and dismay.
Finally, the youngest sister, who was innocent and a bit impulsive, came running in. Seeing her 2 sisters standing still as statues in such a strange pose, she didn't understand what was happening. Seeing her, the 2 older sisters hissed in urgent whispers, "Stay away! Get back!" But the youngest sister didn't understand why she should stay away. She thought innocently, "My sisters are playing a fun game without me. Whatever they can do, I can do too." With that thought, she happily ran over and touched the second sister. And of course, she too was stuck fast. And so, all 3 of the innkeeper's daughters, one stuck to the goose, the others stuck to each other, formed a small, motionless chain of people. That night, they had no choice but to sleep in that bizarre posture beside the golden goose, which continued to radiate its peaceful light, seemingly unaware of the little chaos it had caused. The next morning, the sun rose, and so did the simpleton. He felt refreshed after a good night's sleep. He paid no mind to the 3 girls standing silently in the corner. With his simple mind, he thought only of continuing on his journey. He gently picked up the golden goose and walked right out the door. Immediately, the 3 girls, still stuck to each other and to the goose, were forced to trot along behind him. They could do nothing else. When the simpleton turned right, they turned right. When he turned left, they had to turn left. They formed an involuntary procession, stumbling along the village road covered in the morning mist. They had gone some distance and were out in the middle of a large field when they met a priest walking towards them. The priest was a very stern man. When he saw the sight before him, a young man walking ahead, with 3 pretty girls trailing strangely behind him, he was greatly displeased. He furrowed his brow, raised his staff, and said in a scolding tone, "Have you no shame, you girls, tailing a young man in broad daylight like this? What a disgrace!" With that, he stepped forward, intending to grab the youngest girl's hand to pull her back and teach her a lesson. But the moment his fingers touched her hand, they too stuck fast. The sternness on his face instantly turned to utter astonishment. He tried to pull his hand away, but he could not. And so, the respectable priest also became part of the line, unwillingly forced to run behind the 3 girls.
A little further on, the church sexton came along. He was in a hurry, looking for the priest. When he saw his priest trodden at the heels of 3 girls, he cried out in surprise, "Good heavens, Father! Where are you going in such a hurry? Don't you remember we have an important baptism today?" He ran up, meaning to grab the priest's sleeve to remind him. And of course, the moment he touched the cloth sleeve, he too was stuck fast. The magic simply continued to spread. The line now consisted of 5 people, stumbling along in silence, with only the sound of their breathing and the rustle of their feet on the grass. They were crossing a field when they met 2 peasants who had just finished their work, carrying their hoes on their way home. The priest, despite his predicament, managed to call out, "Good sirs, please come and help us. Pull me and the sexton out of here." The 2 kind-hearted peasants rushed over. They didn't understand what was happening, only that their venerable priest needed help. One reached out and touched the sexton, and the other did the same. Instantly, they too were stuck fast to the procession. Their hose fell from their shoulders to the ground. And so the strange parade now numbered 7. 3 girls, a priest, a sexton, and 2 peasants, all trailing one after another, unwillingly following the simpleton and his golden goose. They were like a strange ribbon, winding through the fields and down the paths, led by a boy with a simple heart and a goose that shone with a gentle light. They said nothing. There was only the silence of bewilderment and unexplainable magic. And just like that, the bizarre procession, led by the simpleton and the golden goose, quietly advanced towards the capital city, where the towers of the royal palace were just beginning to appear on the horizon.
And so, the strange procession arrived before the magnificent gates of the capital city. The city walls were towering, its spires sparkled in the sunlight, and the hustle and bustle of people and carriages was lively but not overwhelming. For the simpleton, who was accustomed to the silence of the forest, everything here was new and astounding. But he was not afraid. He simply walked on, holding the golden goose, with the involuntary procession still trotting along behind him. The story of the strange procession quickly spread throughout the capital. People poured out to see, not to mock, but to marvel at the peculiar sight. A simple-looking young man in the lead, followed by 7 people stuck fast to one another by some invisible magic, all of them marching in step with a shining, solid gold goose. The news eventually reached the ears of the king. The king who ruled the land at that time was a father who dearly loved his daughter. But he also had a great sorrow.
The princess, his only child, though breathtakingly beautiful, was enveloped in a quiet solemnity that was like a fine mist. Since she was a little girl, no one had ever seen her laugh. Her smile seemed to be locked away somewhere very deep inside. Heartbroken by this, the king had issued a royal decree to all the land. Whoever could make the princess laugh would be given her hand in marriage. Many princes, knights, and talented men from all over had come to try their luck. They told the funniest stories, performed the most skillful tricks, but all had failed. The princess's solemnity remained unshaken. When he heard the news of the simpleton's procession, the king ordered them to be brought into the royal courtyard, perhaps with a faint glimmer of hope. The simpleton, in his innocence, knew nothing of the king's decree. He simply followed the flow of the crowd and finally came to a stop in the middle of the vast royal courtyard, before the king, the queen, and the entire royal court. The princess was there as well, sitting on a high balcony, silently looking down.
It was not a loud laugh, but one like the chiming of silver bells, clear and melodious. She laughed. The smile spread across her face as radiant as the sun after a rainstorm, and she kept laughing and laughing as if to make up for all the silent years that had passed. The entire court was stunned, then burst into joy. The sound of the princess's laughter was the most beautiful music they had ever heard. When the princess's laughter finally subsided, the simpleton stepped forward, bowed to the king, and said simply, "Your Majesty, I have made the princess laugh. Now I ask for her hand in marriage." The king was jolted from his joyous state. He looked at the simpleton, a country boy whom everyone called a fool. He could not possibly marry his beloved daughter to such a person. But a king's promise, once given, cannot be taken back. The king became flustered and conflicted. He needed to find a reason. After thinking for a moment, the king said, his voice struggling to maintain its authority, "My promise is true. But to become the princess's husband, you must prove yourself further. I have a very large wine cellar. If you can find a man who can drink that entire cellar dry, I will consider it." It was a seemingly impossible challenge, but the simpleton was not discouraged. He immediately thought of the little old man in the forest. He believed that the place that had given him his first magic would also give him his answer. He returned to the forest, to the very spot where he had felled the old tree. The old man was not there, but he saw another man sitting on a stump, his face a mask of deep sorrow. The simpleton approached him and asked, "Sir, why do you look so sad?" The man looked up, his voice parched. "I am thirsty. My throat is burning with thirst. I have already drunk an entire cask of wine, but to me it was but a single drop in a desert." Hearing this, the simpleton was overjoyed. "Then I can help you," he said. "Please come with me. I will take you to a place where you can drink to your heart's content until your thirst is finally quenched."
He led the man to the king's wine cellar. It was a vast, cool chamber with hundreds of giant oak barrels filled with precious wine. The thirsty man smiled for the first time that day. He walked to the largest cask and began to drink. He drank steadily, rhythmically. Wine flowed into him like a river finding its way to the sea. Everyone watched in amazement. In less than a day, the king's entire enormous wine cellar was completely empty. The simpleton went before the king again, once more demanding to marry the princess. The king was even more astonished and flustered. He came up with a new condition. Drinking is not enough. A kingdom must have enough food. Out in the courtyard, I have had my people use all the flour in the country to bake a mountain of bread. If you can find someone to eat that entire mountain, I will have nothing more to say." The simpleton calmly nodded again and went into the forest. At the same spot, he found another man. This one was gaunt and was cinching his stomach tightly with a leather belt, his face haggard. The simpleton asked what was wrong, and the man replied in a weak voice, "I am hungry. I have just eaten an entire oven's worth of bread, but it was like nothing. My stomach is still completely empty. I have to tighten my belt like this, lest I die of starvation." The simpleton said joyfully, "Stand up and come with me. I will see to it that you eat your fill." He led the hungry man to the royal courtyard. Before them stood a veritable mountain of bread, enormous and fragrant. The man from the forest walked up to it and began to eat. He ate calmly, rhythmically, one piece after another. The entire court watched in silence. The mountain of bread grew smaller and smaller, like snow melting under the spring sun. And in just one day, the entire giant mountain of bread had vanished without a single crumb left. The simpleton, having completed the second challenge, stood before the king one more time. He was silent, patient, and calm. The king looked at him, then at the empty courtyard, and was at a complete loss for words.
The king stood on the palace balcony, looking down at the empty courtyard where the giant mountain of bread had just vanished. His astonishment had now overcome his bewilderment. He looked at the simpleton who stood there patiently, the golden goose still radiating its gentle light by his side. The king realized that this young man was anything but ordinary. He was surrounded by a kind of magic that he could not comprehend.
"This ship will glide upon the land as smoothly as it does upon the water," the old man said. "Go now and claim the happiness you so richly deserve." The simpleton bowed his head in thanks. He stepped aboard the magical ship. Instantly, he felt an extraordinary sense of ease. He needed only to think of where he wanted to go, and the ship began to move without a sound, gliding over the green grass as smoothly as if it were floating on a calm lake. The ship left the forest, crossed the fields, and headed straight for the capital city. People along the road stared in disbelief at the incredible sight. When the magical ship docked gently in the middle of the royal courtyard, the king was standing there with the princess and the entire court. All of his doubts had now vanished, replaced by absolute admiration. He stepped down, smiling, a smile of acceptance and joy. He understood now that this young man possessed something far more precious than all the cunning of the world. A pure heart protected by the heavens and by magic itself. The king could no longer keep his daughter from him. At that very moment, as the simpleton stepped off the ship, one final miracle occurred. The invisible bond that had held the 7 people together suddenly dissolved. The 3 girls, the priest, the sexton, and the 2 peasants were all free. They looked at one another, then at the simpleton, with eyes full of both surprise and gratitude, before quietly bowing and returning to their homes. The wedding was celebrated with great festivity, but it was not a loud affair. It was a truly peaceful and warm day of joy. Candlelight flickered throughout the palace, melodious music played, and above all there was the princess's radiant, unfading smile. She had found the one who could unlock her heart, not with jokes, but with the magic of kindness. After the king enjoyed his old age and passed gently into eternity, the simpleton, the one who was once considered a fool, ascended the throne. He ruled the kingdom not with strict laws or complex schemes, but with his own kind and simple heart. He listened to his people, helped the poor, and the kingdom under his and the queen's reign was always filled with peace and happiness. And so, the simpleton, the boy with the simple heart, found his own happiness and brought happiness to an entire kingdom. His story reminds us that sometimes the greatest magic comes not from power or wisdom, but from a small act of kindness. And just as the simpleton and the princess, after a long journey, finally found their peace, it is now time for you to let your own mind rest. Everything in the story has been settled perfectly. Everything is in its right place, and now it is time for you to find your own place of peace. Close your eyes if you haven't already. Feel your breath, so gentle and so steady. Inhale the stillness of the night, and exhale any lingering thoughts. Let your body sink even deeper into the support of your soft bed. Feel how comfortable, how safe you are. The story is over. Now is the time for dreams. Dreams that are as gentle and peaceful as the story you have just heard. May you have the loveliest of dreams. Sleep well. Until we meet again in the next gentle story.